So here's how I want to set things up. Aaron Nagler, CheeseheadTV.com. Always appreciated. We were joking, not even joking around. Mark Murphy got the draft to Green Bay.
He did indeed.
And if you look at what Mark has done, yeah, there's the silos and the picture of the sled and all this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But under Mark, they've won a Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
Under Mark, Titletown has expanded immensely.
Yes, sir.
And under Mark, they have gotten an NFL draft to come to Green Bay. And I was thinking that historically, where you rank him in terms of important figures has to be a lot higher than anyone.
I think the most fans would probably give him credit for. Yes, I totally agree there. It's funny because when you emailed me, I was kind of rolling it around in my head, and I thought, no one wants to hear this, but if you take away any kind of like categories, right? Like just importance to the organization, he's in the conversation for, easily like top 10. You start talking top 5. You start talking Mount Rushmore, which is, the quintessential offseason fodder. It's hard to put him on the Mount Rushmore at this point, but I would understand if someone did. The idea that his importance gets overlooked is a very real one, and I don't doubt for a moment that Packers fans will look back in like 20 years and understand how important he was as far as in the history of the franchise even, but, let alone the last like 2 decades. But, these days he most certainly gets underappreciated. I don't think there's any doubt there.
Now, as someone who often mocks topics that are designed to fill time, I will say I actually love the Mount Rushmore topic.
Right.
I think, and especially with a team like the Packers, to whittle down 4 guys.
Well, it's just so difficult without any kind of, if you don't have any guardrails, right? Like if you don't say players or executives or any, like if you don't give it some kind of shape, it's an impossible exercise. It just is. You know what I mean? There's 4 people.
Though? Yeah, but we're going to do it.
All right. Curly Lambeau, Vince Lombardi, Bob Harlan, and Mark Murphy. Good night. There you go.
Yeah. They're not a football team.
You know what I mean? Like, you can quibble with it, and I understand people will, but you talk about just being in existence, those are your 4. You know what I mean?
You're going to go all executives? Well, Lambeau.
Well, the players are great. They're wonderful, but without those guys, there's no place for them to play.
So who is it again? Lambeau,
Lombardi, Harlan, Murphy.
Oh, so you are putting Murphy. Is this your real list?
I don't know. Who cares, man? It's like
I care. That's why I'm talking to you.
Okay, how about this? How about Lambeau, Lombardi,
Aaron,
Harlan?
I thought, of anyone to have this discussion with, it would be Aaron Nagler. What an honor!
I don't care about. I have a long-running hatred of the Mount Rushmore topic. See, as much as you love it, I hate it because I think it's ridiculous. But I understand why people do it. So I'll go. Here we go. I'll go. Lambeau, Lombardi, Harlan, Travis Jervey. How's that?
Well, now you're being an asshole.
But that's what the topic calls for. Look, you can make the case if you want to go players, right? You can go Lambeau, maybe Bart Starr, Brett Favre, and Aaron Rodgers, right? But then you're leaving out so many amazing players who were absolutely incredible and instrumental in bringing championships to Green Bay. And you're also leaving out Vince Lombardi. It's just there's no way to do it. There's no real way to do it.
Okay, but we're doing it though. Lambeau.
You got to have Lambeau, right? You can't have Lambeau, and you can't omit Lambeau, and you can't omit Lombardi. So there's 2 right there.
Yeah.
Right? Neither of them,
So let me just tell you mine.
All right.
Lambeau, Lombardi.
Sure.
Bart Starr.
Okay.
And Brett Favre.
See, okay. I'm down with it. But you got to pull the curtain back, right? And say, without Ron Wolf, there is no Brett Favre. And without Bob Harlan, there is no Ron Wolf.
That's true.
So that's where I go to Harlan, And then on Bart Starr, the all-time great, best Packers QB ever, no question about it. But he did coach there for quite a little bit.
And was
wasn't
bad.
too successful, So you're obviously putting him there as a player. But then you're not putting Aaron Rodgers, Reggie White, Charles Woodson, or even going back, Llewellyn, Johnny Blood, Forrest Gregg, who, Vince Lombardi said is the greatest player he ever coached. Like things of that nature.
I think Don Hudson, if we're doing
Don
players.
Hudson, exactly. How do you not put Don Hudson on there if you're doing players? That's where it becomes so difficult for me. But
I do like your angle at it to look more executive. Not that I love suits.
I mean, you don't, and that's the problem, right? It's a sports conversation, so who the hell wants to talk about guys wearing ties, right? So I understand why people kind of dismiss that and like stick with coaches and players. And that's my point. Like if you just make it about coaches and players, then okay, then we can have the conversation of, yeah, it's probably Lambeau, Lombardi. I'd probably go it's so hard. I'd probably go Starr and Favre as well. But I understand why people would make the case for Aaron because Aaron's the better quarterback than Brett Favre. But you talk about the circumstance where Brett Favre stepped into as opposed to Aaron Rodgers, who was basically handed a mantle of winning rather than having to help a team come out of the crap that the Packers were for, 2 decades, 3 decades. I understand the argument for Aaron Rodgers as a better player, but in the Mount Rushmore of importance to the Green Bay Packers, I think a case can be made for Brett Favre in that instance. And I think if you read Cliff Crystal, he would agree with you, so.
Well, with the Rodgers Favre thing and even Starr, so somebody had said, again, this is all arbitrary,
right.
All of it.
Naturally.
But someone said, take Starr out and put in Rodgers to represent that era. I'm not here to represent eras. I'm just trying to find the best 4 guys to help tell the story of the Packers. And where I would go with the quarterbacks, because I got into Lambeau, Lombardi, and then the 3 quarterbacks. With all due to Nitschke and Hudson.
Sure.
And,
yep. I get
Reggie
it. It's the most important position, so it's really hard to separate it out from the importance of the like where the franchise has gone and all of that. I understand that.
I felt like to me, Starr comes 3rd on my Mount Rushmore, and then it was between Favre and Rodgers. And with Favre, this may be a bias because of growing up with.
I'm sure that's part of it. Yeah.
So how old am I when Favre's the starting quarterback? 8. And what I always thought with Favre was, I looked at my dad, and then I looked at Favre, and they're not even like the same kind of person. But I just felt like I don't know what it was. I just felt like for 3 hours that was my dad. And
I feel that.
And I just that connection. And when Favre came back on Thanksgiving, I was not watching the game with my dad, and I called him like crying.
Yeah.
like thank you, and then I wish I was watching this game.
The emotional connection you had to the player. Look,
and Rodgers is within months my age.
Right.
And I don't like him as a person.
Right.
Well, he's a good person.
That we know. We don't know about any of these guys off the field. I mean,
we know Favre's an ass.
We do now, but he was kind of an ass when he was in Green Bay. He was just playing like a god on the football field. It's like I don't. And this is my thing. This has always been my thing. I separate the personal from the professional. Right? Like I only care about what they do on a football field when we're having this conversation.
That's why I would put.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I totally get what you're saying, and I think that's very real for me as well. Like when you have grown up as I did in the 70s and 80s, watching them lose as many games as they did. Then Brett comes along, and it's incredibly emotional to see them start winning and to have this guy playing so well, and there's zero doubt that plays into it. I know there are people out there, probably some of your listeners, who are 100% emotionally connected to Aaron the way we were to Brett, simply because of the age you are when that guy starts and your connection to the team. But I will say, I just go back to what I was talking about before. I think Aaron 100% better quarterback. I don't even think that's an argument, right? But given the situations that they found themselves in, and Aaron handled himself absolutely exemplary, sitting behind Brett, waiting his turn, and then taking over the way he did, I have no quibble with it, right? But there's a lot to be said for getting to sit and learn, as opposed to Brett, who, was drinking himself to death down there in Atlanta and then gets traded for and, thinks, okay, they traded a first-round pick, so I'm probably going to play at some point. And then that point came probably sooner than he expected with Mikowski's injury. and then he's thrust into it, and the way he goes, we all know the story. And the team was terrible. They have a new head coach and all this stuff, and it's just a very different situation. He had to overcome a whole lot more, and I think winning those 3 MVPs, it's so funny. Today's kind of fan doesn't, I don't think, really appreciate how good Brett was. Like, again, Aaron, better quarterback, I'm not taking it away from him. But, man, those 3 MVPs, they didn't just fall out of the sky. He was really freaking good.
Yeah.
For that extended time in the 90s, but it was before the internet, before we were all on Twitter, before it was in the daily conversation. So, and again, I go back to Cliff Crystal wrote about, how Brett being with the Packers maybe didn't save them in the sense of like the strict sense of like, oh, without Brett they would have folded. But man, it's pretty close. He was that important.
Even moving the games from Milwaukee to Green Bay, like. Yep. They were in Milwaukee because they sucked.
Yep, and they needed the gates, and they needed the eyeballs, and they needed the fans. And I'll say, man, like that's why I go back to Bob Harlan. Who made that decision? Bob Harlan made that decision. Like you can't write the history of the Green Bay Packers without Bob Harlan. That's why he's got to be on there.
Well, what you said at first, and again, thank you for doing this. I know you hate this topic.
I do, but it's fun. It doesn't matter. That's the whole point.
If there's any team to do all executives, and Lambeau's a different because
he played and he coached and he put together the team. Hell, he put together the whole team literally. So yeah.
Well, Lombardi was a coach, I guess, but
he was a GM as well. But
if there's any to do non like troop whatever,
right.
Everyone knows what I'm saying. It might be the Packers because, and now you can get into the different eras like. Yeah. Bob Harlan was massive. And Mark Murphy, that goes back to the whole point is he is like being, and I think he will be forever until like we're old.
Right.
Realize what he did. I think once the draft comes here.
Oh, 100%. And I love that he gets it right out the door, basically, because he has to retire that July in 2025 due to the bylaws. And basically, on the way out the door, here's my final parting gift to you, Packers fans, is a draft in Green Bay, which I think will be amazing. It is funny because, like, I don't want people to think that I think Murphy is without flaws, right? Like, there are plenty of times that I've kind of gone after him in my tenure at CheeseheadTV, if you will, to the point where he's like, are you Packer Aaron on CheeseheadTV? I was like, yes, I am. I know I've written some unflattering things, but, I don't think it's unfair to point things out. Like, he probably took too long to make the move away from Ted Thompson. But I understand that Ted was sick and it was a very delicate kind of situation.
It's hard.
So it's hard for me to like put, kind of clobber him too much for that. There's other things that you can point to and say, oh, he probably maybe dragged his feet a little bit here or whatever. But man, in his overall tenure from the moment he took over to right now, he has done a fantastic job. And most people, not everybody, but most people who criticize him have no idea what he does.
Yeah, and he still made the changes. Like in Golden State, Bob Myers is literally retiring, so he doesn't have to make changes.
Right.
With the Warriors.
Right.
Murphy at least did that.
Well, look, I think some of this will end up playing out as far as his legacy goes with how Brian and Matt turn out without Aaron.
Oh, yeah.
That's obviously a big component of it. So we have to let that play out.
Oh, yeah. If Jordan Love is awful, then
and they can't basically get back to some kind of contending window, then that's a strike against him. And he, will be looked at unfavorably in that regard. But the shepherding between when he came on to right now, think of the fact that they've, up until I think it was last year, they had won more football games in his tenure than any other franchise other than the Patriots. That's pretty impressive. I don't care what you're talking about as far as, when he should have, who he should have hired or whatever. That's a pretty impressive track record. As an executive. So, yeah, I'm all for – I did a whole video last week about how underappreciated Mark Murphy is.
Oh, well, we're good. We're of like mind. I like that.
100%.
Let me throw you some quickies.
Yes, sir.
Just give me quick answers.
Okay.
Like not like a yes or no answer, but –
Okay.
Who is more trying to convince themselves they made the right decision, Aaron Rodgers or the New York Jets?
Oh, wow. It's got to be Rodgers, 100%. And I think the Jets, they're so in love. Like they're so happy to have him.
Every tweet's about him. Relax.
Everything's about him, which would be, of course, if you're the Jets and have been so terrible, haven't been to the playoffs in ages. I get it. I think Aaron's happy. I think he's glad to be in New York. I think he's glad to be on a new team. But man, when you've been in one place for such a long time, that's hard, man. Especially at the tail end of your career. It's going to be a challenge. I think he's going to play really well this year, but I think that if those are the choices, it's definitely Aaron.
How close is Davante Adams to admitting to himself that he regrets asking for a trade?
I don't think he regrets it at all. And I know we all sit here on the outside, look at kind of the situation with the Raiders and kind of assume that. But I don't think it has much to do with like the football team as much as it did on the personal stuff as far as wanting to be closer to his family. I think that played such a big component.
Getting a Taco Bell in his house.
Getting a Taco Bell in his home. I do think the car thing is probably sticking in his craw, because I do buy that he really wanted to go play with his boy, and then he got 1 year and his boy was kicked out. So that's got to suck. But he is making a ton of money. He is closer to home, and he's more of a Vegas guy. I think he was just done with being in small-ass town Green Bay. And if you listen to that podcast he did with Brandon Marshall, I think you really get that sense of, look, I was just, it was time for a new chapter. So I don't think he regrets it at all, actually.
Does David Bakhtiari want to be traded? Is that why he keeps talking about a rebuild?
No, he does not. He is just telling his actual true feelings, which I applaud him for, because we always ask athletes to do that. And then when they do, we ask questions like that. So no, I don't think he wants to be traded at all.
And then how much can Packers, anyone, and we're talking beat writers, podcasters,
right,
radio guys, how much can we cover Rodgers without it looking like we're pathetic for clicks?
That's really good. I don't know.
I
haven't touched him. I don't.
I'm not a Packer.
Yep. That is 100% me. I am like, he is someone else's problem now. Like, occasionally he'll get brought up to me on my chats or on Twitter or whatever.
Talking about Rodgers in this form, I think makes sense. We talked about his Packer career, but I don't care if he's hanging out with Miles Morales or Keller or whatever, Davis or whoever.
Yeah. No, I feel you. He's going to be a topic from time to time. That's kind of unavoidable, right? I do think, man, he generates traffic. So I get it if people want to go to that well. I mean, I 100% understand that. Somebody this morning was it was a Cowboys blogger, but he was saying, like, I can spend like 8 hours putting together a piece about the salary cap ramifications of certain moves and the long-term process of team building, and I'll get 20,000 views, and then I'll put up, an embed of Dak Prescott's tattoo from Instagram, and I'll get 200,000 page views. So, that's the gig, man. So I don't ever begrudge anyone in the business using that, right? Aaron Rodgers is instant eyeballs, and I got no problem with it.
I realize what content is. I try to pump out these daily podcasts and hang on to an audience and just try to, make it worth their time. And I'm happy with the numbers. And then I drive through Rosendale and take a picture, and my Facebook had 1,000 shares of people bitching about, like, okay.
Yep. That absolutely tracks.
All content, all people wanting content is self-affirmation about what they already think.
Either what they think or what they don't think, and they want to bitch about it, and so that's where they go. Yes. No question. Here I am. You're just creating a platform.
Conversation.
No, that's never going to happen. They just want you to provide a platform where they can argue, essentially.
Yeah, well, I guess. I'll keep trying. I'll keep fading away in the
Keep fighting the good fight, buddy. That's all you can do.
Aaron, thank you. CheeseheadTV.com. Appreciate you as always.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Bart.